10 knife skills in 10 minutes. If you're exploring and all you have is a knife, enter the woods and make what's known as a blaze on a tree. Simply scrape a small portion about eye level, showing the direction that you traveled from and where you're headed to. Making the blazes at eye level will give you a higher probability of discovery and can be seen from further away. Then move out until you can barely see the one that you made and repeat the process. Always place the blaze on both sides, showing both directions where you came from and where you're headed to. You can continue this process and be able to move with confidence, knowing that you can find your way back. After you're done exploring and you're ready to return, simply follow the breadcrumbs that you left to return to your point of origin. It can also be an effective tool if you're lost and moving about, as a searching party can use the blazes to find you. I think we all know that a lighter doesn't have sufficient resources to catch a larger piece of fuel on fire, but we can ignite a tree's worth of fuel on fire with a little bit of preparation with our knife. Even in the wettest of climates, dry wood can be harvested from dead standing trees. Using a small, we can cut one down and then continue to process it into manageable lengths. Now, you can't be too serious and you have to have a little bit of fun, so why not take those pieces and juggle them around a little bit. Now, our knife work can begin. We can use that stump from the tree that we've cut down as an anvil, and one of the pieces we harvested as a field expedient hammer. Place the knife on the first piece to be worked and batten down, splitting the log in half. We can continue to batten down the pieces into smaller and smaller pieces in order to create tender and sustaining pieces of fuel for our fire. With minimal effort, even a short feat from a small tree can produce a lot of dry, usable pieces in order to get a fire going, whether we need to cook, signal, or just stay warm. Of course, even finger-sized pieces of fuel are too large to start with a lighter, so we may need to use our knife for another task that can help get that thing going. Using our knife, we can make a series of shallow cuts, producing fine shavings, making what's known as a feather stick. It can take some practice to get used to, and is much easier to do with a sharp knife. Don't be concerned if your feathers fall off at first. You can collect them into a small pile if needed. This technique can be used for green and dry wood as well. I've always found it's easier to work on the corners of the sticks, so I will often rotate the stick if the section I'm working on becomes too broad. Slow and steady will win the race when making a feather stick, and using the ground as a support will help make that process steady. Now we're just about ready to make a fire. Of course, it's easy to use a lighter to ignite a man-made fire starter. But what happens when instead of a lighter, all we have is a knife? We can take a feather stick and use our ferro rod, of course. But many people have difficulty using a ferro rod to ignite a fire this way. So one technique that you can use is to take the 90-degree edge of your spine and scrape and rough up your stick, scraping towards the feathers. This creates very fine and porous material that should take a spark much easier. Now we can use our knife as a striking surface on our ferro rod to create hot sparks capable of igniting our fuel source. If done correctly, it should only take a few strikes to get things going. Make sure that you have the rest of your tinder pile ready to go, and now you can enjoy a good, workable fire in the woods, whether we need to stay warm or boil some water. Of course, while we're out in the woods, you want to be able to explore around a little bit. You look up and down and around just to see what's around you. In your explorations, your knife is a solid tool to assist you. If you come across a pine or fir tree with a lot of fat wood, your knife can be used to scrape or cut pieces off to help make today's or tomorrow's fire. A good field knife can be used for digging a small fire pit to ignite that fat wood into a small cooking or heating fire. But we're not done exploring yet. Use your knife to poke into a thatcherite mound. Move bits and pieces around so we don't have to worry about spiders. Poke through scat and other pieces of debris that you find. Oops, this one is alive. Well, I don't want to bed down next to this mound in a survival situation. I just found me some sustenance. This is CSI Cascadia. Oh, crap. We forgot our tent stakes. Not a problem if you have a knife. You find small usable pieces or harvest some samplings and you are on your way. Remove any limbs from the tree and measure about 1 hand's length and make what's known as a beaver cut to snap into usable sections. Now we can use our knife to sharpen one end and round off the other. Once they're all ready to go, you can make a small incision about 1 inch down from the rounded off side. This cut will serve as a backstop for what's known as a 7-notch. Now we're ready to get our shelter up so that you can stay dry, and our handmade stakes are easy to secure into the ground, and the notch features as a brake for our cordage. And it didn't cost us a dime. In the Pacific Northwest where I'm at, most of the ground isn't rocky or difficult to put a stake into the ground. But that's not always going to be the case. And we often don't realize this until we've unloaded our gear, made preparations for our camp. And by this time, you may feel that it's too late to move on to a different site. Can our knife help us out in this scenario? You bet it can. If you found it a challenge to simply slide your stakes into the ground and you don't want to move your site, you can use the butt of your knife as a hammer to pound in the stakes into the ground. Just make sure you don't slice your head open. Working on simple traps and snares is a great way to spend some time relaxing in the woods, and a much better task to master when you're not hungry, starving, and trying to survive than when you are. For this technique, we'll use our knife to prepare a thumb-sized selection of dry wood. First, begin by sharpening one end to place into the ground. Then, using the beaver cut technique, we can take off about 3 or 4 inches to give us the 2 pieces that we're going to need for the project. Remember that 7-notch that we used for the stake? We're going to do that again on the longer piece, and then repeat the process on the smaller piece, only this time it's called an L-notch. We can take both notches and put them together, creating the foundation for a spring snare that can be used for hunting or fishing. Now find some sign of some small game traveling about and insert the longer stake into the ground and then place our snare wire. Carefully place the 2 notches together, make some final adjustments to your snare, and you are on your way. Throwing a knife as a weapon is never a good idea. Neither is knife fighting, especially if you're fighting a bear, unless you're Hugh Glass. But he was incredibly lucky to survive this harrowing event with a grizzly. But we can use our knife as a hunting tool or self-defense weapon. Find a wrist-sized tree that has at least 6 to 8 feet before it narrows down to less than 1 inch. Harvest your selection and continue the process by cutting to your desired length and delimbing it. Now, we're ready to return to camp and make final preparations. What we have now is the foundation for a staff that can be used for walking or fighting. And while we could just sharpen one end, if we want to make it deadlier, we can take some cordage and lash our field knife to the end. Once it's complete, you now have a deadly spear perfect for hogs and zombies alike. Sometimes you just need a small and simple project to work on at camp to help pass the time or to make a handmade and unique gift for a loved one. There's only so much work that you can do with an axe, so a knife is needed to do some finer work. Carving can seem intimidating to many, but it doesn't have to be. And while I'm no Doug Linker, I do enjoy the creative process of turning a piece into something that is usable. One of the keys that I found is not to begin with a piece that is too short. Not only is it safer, but you can always remove material, you can't add it back in. But pretty soon, your piece begins to take shape, and if you need to, you can always draw your template on to give you a guide. I found that if you're patient, the wood will tell you what to do. In this case, I'm just working on a smaller piece. Yeah, Stoker is carving a spoon. Time to get it home and to get some tongue wool on it. Team, if you want to master your craft and develop your tactical virtue, Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on future content. Consider becoming a channel member. It's going to give you exclusive access to content not available to anybody else. I appreciate you guys. Until then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked.